But other people might see this bag as like an old dirty bag. I do find that, especially if you're shopping on eBay, sometimes you find a vintage gem and you get it and it's in really crap condition and you feel like you overpaid. I think there's that side to vintage as well, where you just feel like, oh, I should have just bought a new bag from the store. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Jess. If you love shopping and handbag videos, please subscribe to my channel. I also have a membership where you can view secret videos that I post for members only. Oh my gosh, my little boo-boos are staring at me. Okay. Okay, I got distracted, but let's talk about today's topic. It is vintage bags. Do I recommend buying vintage bags? Are they better than buying new bags? Honestly, guys, I think there could be a huge debate about this, because sometimes when I buy a vintage bag, I kind of regret it, and then other times I feel like I go through stages where I'm like, no, I'm only buying new or pristine bags, or no, actually vintage is better. So let me know, guys, are you more team vintage or team new? Because I think that there are pros and cons to both. So my first ever Chanel bag happened to be a vintage piece. It was this beautiful kind of like lambskin bag with this very intricate chain. Because it was from the 90s, it had the 24 karat gold plated hardware, and the lambskin felt really like scrumptious. I don't know, it felt like the leather was like nicer than modern day Chanel bags, and that's when I was quite surprised when I did start buying new Chanel bags. I noticed that the leather felt not as nice as vintage, even though the vintage was bad in other ways. So the reason why I went from buying vintage Chanel to buying new Chanel is because I didn't like that vintage kind of tend to have that old feel, and it tended to feel, it also had wear and tear, it could have had fading in the hardware and all that. So I kind of have gone through stages in my life where I've dabbed into new bags and dabbed into vintage. So with vintage Chanel, I really do feel like it feels like it more substantial, particularly the hardware and the leather and the way that the bags are made. Even structurally, they feel better. And if you find a vintage Chanel bag in excellent condition that hasn't been touched or anything, it is actually quite rare, and it can also be quite high in value. So sometimes when you find vintage Chanel bags that are beautiful condition and well kept, it's not necessarily cheaper than buying a new bag. I mean, if I go to Japan, they have stores that are flooded with these beautiful pristine vintage bags. A lot of them are like immaculate, and they do sell for more than sometimes what you would see in the Chanel boutique, because they are kind of become these collector's pieces that just look so stunning, you know. And I think that's the benefit of vintage, is that sometimes you can buy like gems that actually are more valuable than the modern day ones, because you guys know with modern day bags, they don't make them like they used to. Sometimes they cut corners, they're not as innovative with the hardware, and they're also more mass produced now, so attention to detail is not necessarily there like it was in the 90s or before then. So I wanted to share with you guys some of my current vintage bags and what are the pros to them and what I don't like about them as well, and whether I really think they're worth it. There is one beautiful vintage bag that I'm eyeing at the Persa Fair at the moment. Cannot afford it right now, to be honest, but it is a Kelly 20 in Rouge H in box calf, and it's vintage. It is in immaculate condition, but it is like around $20,000, which I think a lot of people would say paying $20,000 for a vintage bag is really overpriced. But at the same time, because of the style of it and because it's quite rare and discontinued, that's what makes it worth what it is, particularly because of the condition for a vintage piece is really amazing and untouched, which it can be quite hard to find. So one of the vintage bags that I still own is this Ferragamo Icon bag from the 90s. This bag is still in the current Ferragamo collection, and in the boutique the similar style costs, I believe, over 3,000 Australian dollars. However, this one that I got from eBay from a Japanese auction, I only paid about 250 Australian dollars, so I made a huge saving buying vintage. However, I will say that this bag does not feel anywhere near new, which a lot of people would be put off that, I think. The benefit of the vintage one is that it has the really gold hardware in the, I think it is gold plated as well, whereas the new Ferragamo bags have more of a champagne gold hardware. Also, this is in this gorgeous like box calf leather, which has developed like a beautiful patina. which you often see in vintage bags. If they're particularly in box calf, they start to have this like really natural sheen. With some vintage bags, they actually age really beautifully, like a new bag wouldn't, which is very interesting to observe. And I have heard that like in the past, a lot of these designer houses like Hermes and Chanel used to use even better quality leather than they do now. I don't know if that's right, guys, but you can see in some of these older bags, they seem to age in a really nice way, which some people may really enjoy. The bad thing about this bag is that the inside, when I got it, was rather sticky. So I'm not sure if the inside of the bag is actually real leather. Like, I know that with some vintage bags, like even vintage Chanel, sometimes they use like PU on the lining, and then the outside is like the real like calf skin or lamb skin. So I found that some of the inside like stuck together, and I had to like separate it, and it was quite dingy on the inside. But after I cleaned it out and restored it a little bit, it's now much better. And I did, you know, had to put some TLC into this to get the structure back. I had to stuff it because it was a little bit bent and everything. So yeah, with the vintage bags, like, I guess if they're a complete bargain and they're in a bit worse for wear condition, that might be quite off-putting, and one may say it's more worth it to spend thousands in the boutique and get a new one. But there is some, like, I guess, unique things about the vintage piece that you can't no longer get from the store. Like I said, the leather is different, the hardware is different, and it has a kind of more of a charm to it as well. I also picked up its micro bag, its little baby pre-loved. I'm not sure what year this is from. It looks a little bit more modern day to me, but it could be vintage as well. You can save a lot off the retail if you go for vintage, but of course it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. So this bag is from 1991. The main selling point of this bag for me was that it was from 1991, which is my birth year, and I loved the Rouge Vive color with the gold hardware. Now this bag, I think I got it for, I can't remember the exact price because it was like Singaporean dollars, but I think it was like 14,000 Australian, about that. I think it was 14,000 Australian, which is a lot for a vintage bag, to be honest. I think I could have potentially overpaid there, because I did see a similar one in Japan that was in very beat up condition for 6,000 Australian dollars. That being said, it was quite dingy and the handle was a bit busted. So that's what you get, right? You have to kind of either compromise on the quality with the cost and the condition. So with vintage, that all comes into play. And often if you find a vintage piece that's in really well-kept condition, it tends to sell for really high amounts. This one was really well kept for the age. Does have a bit of a dent at the back, but nothing too crazy. And a lot of people who buy vintage Hermes, because I even noticed in Japan, there was some specific stores that they didn't sell new Hermes bags, like a more vintage. They only sell vintage bags. And the reason for that is a lot of people just prefer the look and the leathers that they used to do back in the day. For example, this leather is Courchevel leather, which is a discontinued leather that's very similar to Epsom. But I've heard like a few Hermes collectors say they actually much prefer the Courchevel leather as opposed to the Epsom leather, because it just has more of a shine to it. It wears a little bit better. And I do have an Epsom bag as well, which is from 2006, which is, to be honest, it's almost vintage. 2006, yeah, it's 2 years off vintage. I usually classify vintage as like 20 years older, or 20 years or more. So it's almost vintage, but yeah, a lot of people like the 90s Hermes bags because they have, I guess, like Gulliver leather, and then there's the Courchevel, which they now have Swift and Epsom, which is similar. So you might prefer the feel of the older leathers. Also, I don't know, the hardware is a little bit different. The dust bag, it just has more of a different feel to it, which if you're a collector, and if you're somebody also who has like endless amounts of money and can get any bag that you want from the boutique, there's actually a bit of a thrill in the chase about finding a vintage gem in really well kept condition that even people who are very, very wealthy will still sort to look after, which is why bags like that bag at the Persephone, like that Mini Kelly bag, although it's like could be like over 20 years old, it's still valued at that much. One may see it as like an old bag, but it's still valued like that because it's very desirable for what it is, and there are people out there that are willing to pay that high price for it. Whereas something like this Ferragamo bag, well, it's not as desirable. The brand is not as, I guess, well sought after as an Hermes bag, so the vintage one drops down to like $200. That was kind of a bargain, but yeah, you will see some vintage styles you can get for absolutely next to nothing, which is crazy to see how people's perception of different objects change depending on the brand and what it is. I guess if there's a market for something, it always means that it can be more valuable than like what others may perceive it to be. I did not pay little for this bag, although it's vintage, and because it's a Kelly one, it doesn't have the additional D rings, which actually some collectors prefer that because it's the first kind of Kelly modern day adaptation, whereas the new Kelly bags, they have the little ring for the strap, which I actually think is a pro. But yeah, some people prefer the vintage style because that was like, yeah, just that's become rarer as time goes by. That will be a rarer element to have because they don't make it like that anymore. Yeah, I guess there are some benefits to buying vintage, and actually sometimes vintage can become more valuable than the more modern day pieces for the reasons that I specified. The quality, the leather was different. There were actually more limited in production as well. Another vintage bag I have is from year 2000, and this is actually in really good condition. And I picked this up for I can't remember the exact amount, but it was well under 2,000. I think it was 1,300 or something. And it's a trim 35, so it is like 24 years old. It was really well kept. So the reason why this was a good price for what it is because it was a trim bag, which is not as desirable as a Kelly or a Birkin. So this ended up being a great style, and the quality is very amazing. It's nowhere. If this was in the boutique at Hermes, I'm sure it would be over $10,000, something crazy like that, because it's a really big piece of leather. It's a big bag. So for me, buying vintage Hermes, particularly in non-quota bags, it's totally worth it, and you can find some really hidden gems on the market from, you know, the early 2000s or the 90s that are still in really great condition. Another bag that I got was my Palum 32. This is also from the year 2000. This was also under $2,000 Australian, so if this was in the boutique today, I feel like it could be like 15,000. So I know that sounds crazy, guys, but I honestly think, like, because I know that like the mini Bolide, like the Bolide 25 is like 12,000, so this is like a bigger bag. Anyway, I don't know how much the retail would be, but this vintage one, I will say that the handles are a little bit worn, which some people might not like. But other than that, it's actually quite good. So there is some wear and tear that comes with vintage that you may not like. Also, it's the blue jean color, which it was like the first blue jean color. So it's slightly different from the new blue jean, because I know that Hermes reissued the new blue jean color. So if you're a collector, you might want a piece of like the first blue jean color, all that. So with vintage, you can get discontinued colors, and for collectors, that might also be very appealing. Last vintage bag I picked up is also from the year 2000, which is so random. I keep finding bags from the year 2000. Also, my vintage Kelly 28, which I recently sold, was from the year 2000, which was also in a discontinued leather. So this one is in crinoline. I actually, when I got my Cabas Cellier, I'm not going to lie, guys, I'm going to be completely honest. So I got this bag and I really love it. And this was pre-loved, but it's a newer bag. So it's only like 1 or 2 years old probably. I think it might be from 2021 actually. It could be like 3 years old, but it was like not really worn very much, and it feels new. And I really love that bag, but this bag does feel old, which I think is the con of vintage. A lot of vintage bags just feel old. They feel worn in. They just have marks on them, and they even might feel a little bit dirty. And I think that's the part of vintage that a lot of people don't like at all. Like, it feels dirty, and it can even have a bit of a weird energy about it. And this bag, I wouldn't say it's like completely dirty, but it does have like 2 marks on the inside, which I find a bit like yuck. So it's not the worst. Let me just show you guys. I paid 900 Australian dollars for this bag. So some may say that's expensive, some may say that that's good, but it has like 2 little marks on the inside, just there and there. So it's not like that, like crazy, but I guess that's the thing about buying pre-loved bags, is that they do come with like these random imperfections sometimes. The benefit of this bag is because it's Barenia on the trim, it's developed this very beautiful softness to it that you wouldn't be able to, I guess, have with a newer bag. So it's already developed this beautiful patina and like luster, which is something that I really appreciate, and it kind of it motivates me to actually look for another Barenia bag in the future, like a vintage one, because I really like the way that it actually feels. It just feels extremely luxurious and soft. Also, this is in crinoline, which is horsehair, which is also, not very common. So in a sense, it does have a lot of interesting aspects to it, which drew me to it. And as somebody who likes to follow Hermes and like all the different styles that they do in the leathers, I found it a very intriguing bag. But other people might see this bag as like an old dirty bag, so it really depends on the individual there. But I think it's kind of cool. A part of me did honestly feel like after I got that tote bag, I forgot to tell you guys that I was like, should I sell this bag? Because I feel like, did I like buy too many bags at once? Because I honestly feel like my new Cabaselier is nicer than this bag. But yeah, I think if I was going to sell it, I'd probably just sell it for $900, what I paid for it. But at the same time, I do think that it's like quite a cool like summer bag. So I did make it a bit shorter because I put a little D-ring on it, but you can just take that off and wear it crossbody. But I think it's quite a cool bag actually. But yeah, I don't think it would necessarily be for everybody, because it does have some like signs of wear because it is old. Well, it's not old, but it's, 24 years old. Let me know, are you into vintage? Would you buy a vintage bag, or is it really not for you? Or would you only buy pristine vintage items that are quite hard to find? Let me know. I know there's also people who love to like save vintage bags and restore them and give them new life. I think there's something really exciting about that as well. But I also don't like the side of vintage where something is in not the best condition and you end up overpaying for something. I do find that, especially if you're shopping on eBay, sometimes you find a vintage gem and you get it and it's in really crap condition and you feel like you overpaid. I think there's that side to vintage as well, where you just feel like, oh, I should have just bought a new bag from the store. Do you find buying vintage more exciting? Let me know. And thanks for listening to my blurby video today. Hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like if you liked it, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!